And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Isabeau Maxwell, who originally was a skeptic with a science background. A series of events opened her up to her own intuition, and she became a psychic medium. Isabeau, thanks for joining us and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with those events that opened you up.
Yes. I was 32, and like you said, I have a science background. I was a math major, chemistry minor in college. Very, just business oriented. I didn't have religion or spirituality in my life. I wasn't against it. I just didn't have any time for it. It wasn't in any of my circles. So at 32, my grandmother was passing. She was across the country. So I was in New Hampshire. She was in Minnesota. And I wasn't able to be there with her, but the family was able to have me on the phone in the hospice room when she passed, which was a really beautiful thing. Now, my grandmother was like my mom, which I know a lot of people have that experience as well. And I hung up the phone and I was absolutely devastated. I was devastated. It was the middle of the day in my apartment. I was alone. And she showed up an hour afterwards in spirit form. I would say about 70% solid. So solid enough.
Wow.
That it wasn't, out of the corner of the eye. She was right in front of me. And she was standing sideways too, which I thought was kind of interesting, but she turned her head and she smiled at me and she winked and then she just popped right back out. And I wouldn't say I was like in the lollipops and butterfly kind of feels right there. I was more scared of the moment because up until this point, that didn't exist. Psychics were frauds and all this kind of stuff. And that's my old belief structure. And all I had was, pop culture movies in my head. So my first reaction was to be scared. My second reaction was to just brush it off as grief. My mind was playing tricks on me. The neurons were firing a certain way. Like I had all this way to talk myself out of it. And then I went to bed and I woke up the next morning and I didn't say anything to my husband at the time. And the next morning I woke up and he said, I had the weirdest dream about your grandmother. And it was so realistic that I could see like every detail of what she was wearing. She was wearing, this light blue shirt, short sleeved and buttoned. And he described to a T what she was wearing when she showed herself to me the day before. And I thought, okay, what if this is real? I've heard stories of people not believing something and then they dive into it and then they start to uncover truth that, and it might be real. And brutal honesty, I thought if it was real, I wouldn't lose her, right? So it was like, okay, so I'm going to take the chance, but I'm holding a pretty high bar, right? And I pursued it for a couple months. I found a Tai Chi instructor that I knew, and he was like, and I went to him, and I said, you're the strangest guy I know, can you help me? And he smiled. He loved me through it unconditionally. You follow a spiritual path and over time you become a little bit more conscientious and compassionate. And I was just pretty short back then with my language, but he helped me. He showed me how to do pendulum work, how to get yes and no answers from a spirit. I still didn't believe it, but I started to get this sort of like waterfall rush of goosebumps. And I made the decision that she was around me because she showed up so solid, but then I didn't see her again. Like I didn't have that repeat experience immediately. So for a couple of months, I would get goosebumps and then I would do the pendulum for yes and no and get a message from her. Now, a couple months into this, I said, okay, lady, I love you, but you're not giving me anything that's proof-based. And I'm worried about my mental health. I'm raising 2 kids. I'm worried that I'm making this up and I don't want to spiral down that road. So you're going to need to kind of bring it or I'm going to have to cut this off. And I was driving errands by myself that day, which was great. So it was good to have a day off and have some time alone. Got the rush, pulled over, pendulum worked for about 20 minutes to get a pretty good message. And it was this, that my mother was going to call me. She was going to need money, but that I wasn't going to be the one to help her. A friend of hers would. And I said, okay, this is solid enough that when it doesn't happen, I'm walking away. I'm done. A couple hours later, my mom calls and says, I'm in Vegas. I need you to take, this was so long ago that this is when we had to like go to banks and stuff, right? She goes, so I need you to go to your bank, get cash out, drive it to my bank and deposit it. I said, okay, I gotcha. And I did that. Went to my bank, got cash, 2 miles down the road, went to her bank, and I'm on the way to her bank, and I think to myself, no, I've done this before. So this isn't a stretch. And I pulled into the parking spot of her bank, and she called again and said, hey, hon, don't worry about it. My friend wired me money. And I went, I'm in. And then the second I said that, like, it got so much more clear. The minute I said, I'm in, the minute I allowed myself to believe, I started to see and hear intuitive messages with a lot more clarity. And that, in a nutshell, is how somebody at 32 goes from skeptic to psychic medium.
Was she at her prime age when she appeared to you, or the age just before she transitioned?
The age just before she transitioned.
All right.
Yeah.
You said that you felt a rush and then you got out your pendulum. What do you mean by feeling a rush?
Well, we get goosebumps. I heard someone call them soul shivers, and I was like, that's a great term. But we get goosebumps, and we can receive that as confirmation. Your intuition is confirming for you that something's going on. Absolutely, 100%. This was more like goosebumps mixed with a feeling of going over a roller coaster, that kind of dip that you get. And I got to tell you, once I started opening up the communication directly with her, that went away. And here I am 20 years later, and I've never felt that again. So that was a very specific feeling that was, it just never happened again. I do get goosebumps, but not that. And I almost kind of feel like it's like, here I am, science-based, skeptic, maybe a little, thick-headed. I was like stubborn. And I almost kind of feel like it was either my guide or her going, hey, like, really listen. Don't brush off this moment. They only happened a couple times a week, maybe at the most, but they were so distinct that, yeah, that's interesting. No one's ever asked me that question before. That's really cool. And never happened again.
Those are specific things, like your mother's going to ask you for money and you're going to go to the bank. How did that communication play out?
Years and years of Gen X and years of playing that old 20 questions game with my family on road trips and stuff. You have 20 questions to guess person, place, or object. And I grew up playing that game. So you get the two biggest opposites and you start narrowing it down. Is this about family? Is this about friends? Is this about me? All right, family. Is it about mom? Is it about dad? Mom, got it. Is it about money? Is it about relationships? And so you get the big pieces and then you break it back down. It's not the fastest, way to communicate intuitively, but it's all I had.
Are you still in communication with her?
Yes, not as much as I was. I was in constant communication with her for about 2 years. And she was my security blanket. She was my safety blanket in life as well. She protected me. She was incredible. 2 years into my process, I had developed my intuition. I had worked with my first spirit guide to do that. And then I had gone out into the world. I was working as a professional medium, and I got asked to do my first speaking engagement. Now, it was a library. It was like 12 people. This was a very small situation. But for me, I was a very behind the scenes person, huge introvert. I would rather not go outside. And I was nerve-wracked. It was the first time I ever spoke in front of people. So it was a very scary thing. And I did it. And I did it very well. And I was really proud of myself. Afterwards, she showed up and she said, I remember her saying, sweetie, I'm going to go for a while. And I was like, what do you mean? You're going to go for a while? And she said, it's just time for me to go for a while. And brutal honesty, you know, I think I reverted to 10 years old and said, you don't have to go anywhere. I know how this stuff works now. I learned it. I've been focused on it for 2 years. You don't have to leave. Don't leave. And I now know that I hadn't ever processed the grief of losing her until I lost her temporarily in spirit form. I would say about 6 months into that, I went, okay, all right. She needed to kind of kick me out of the nest because I was really, holding on tight to her being by my side 24/7 through the process. Because I got to tell you, going from skeptic to a psychic medium who's doing like house clearings and readings and all of this type of stuff, that's not an easy transition, especially for someone as logical as me.
Sounds like your spiritual journey moved from her to a spirit guide. That was
Yes.
kind of your next teacher after the Qigong guy. Was it Qigong?
Yeah. Tai Chi.
Tai Chi. There it was. Close. Tai Chi. Yeah. After
Yeah,
the
shout
Tai
out to
Chi.
him. He's an incredible guy. But yes, I actually met my spirit guide, I would say a couple months after the experience with my first experience with my grandmother. So I worked with both of them for about 2 years. And she was the one that I would like say, am I okay? And she'd be like, yeah, you're okay. You got this. You're all right. Or I would say to her, like, I'm scared. The first spirit guide I worked with was clearly a teaching spirit guide. It was journaling. This is how this works. This is how this works. This is, and I worked with him for about 2 years until, it was more like he just didn't, it's not fantastical or anything. It was just more like he just stopped calling me in, I guess.
How does that process happen? Through journaling, like you said, or are you clairaudient?
How did I meet him?
Yeah, and how do you communicate with him?
I was actually at a friend's house and I was leaving, and he lived in about 4 acres of land, 3 or 4 acres of land, and most of it was wooded. So, to a city girl like myself, originally, I would say he lived in the woods. And I was leaving, and I felt a pull, like to go to look into the woods, which was odd. It was just the middle of the day, and I saw, like a heat. What would you call that? The heat pattern over a road. Yeah, like that temperature signature pattern, something like that.
Yeah.
And I found it interesting. And then I went back to the friend's house. And then when I was leaving again, I think it was the second time, I saw it kind of go up into the shape of a person. So I didn't see like a spirit. I just saw this sort of transparent shape of a person. But there was something in me that was like, I have to figure, I was like, there was like this obsession. I got to figure out what this is. And I finally said to my friend, can I walk out there and see what this weird transparent shape is? And they were like, sure. And I walked out, and I didn't see him at that point. Again, kind of this translucent sort of shape. I heard him say, come back next Thursday or something like that. And I was like, that is the weirdest thing. And so I just brushed it off. And Thursday came. And of course, I woke up and went, well, now I got to find out what might happen. Right. And he did that with me for a couple of weeks. Every time I would go out there, he would be like, come back next Monday, come back next Saturday. And finally, I was like, if I can hear you say, come back next whatever, maybe we could progress to something else. And he's like, I just wanted to make sure you were committed. And he said, I've got some things to teach you. It took me a couple of weeks to start to see him. But I could hear him very clearly. So yeah, being able to see and hear are my two biggest strengths.
In the beginning, you were learning all these techniques and things. How did you apply it, and what did you apply it to?
Well, first off, I'll say that I applied it secretly because you can't come from my world pre 32 years old, and just all of a sudden tell everybody you know that you're seeing spirits, because everybody you know would instantly assume that you should get some medical help, because those were my circles. So I really kind of kept it, to myself for a long time, until I finally, you know, stepped out and said, okay, I'll do readings. But there were like one or two friends I could talk to. I would go there, and I know this is silly, but when I started to see him, he felt like he had such a big presence that I called him Big Dog. I was like, "Can I call you Big Dog?" And he was like, "Sure." And I was like, "All right." So I've just lovingly called him that ever since. When I asked him what his actual name was, he said, "Which one?" And I went, "That's confusing," until he explained that, right? How many lives that we all have. But I would sit down and he would give me a concept or a teaching, or explain how lifetimes are not linear, or how everyone has the sixth sense and how it interacts with the five senses. And I would write it all down, and it never failed. I would meet with him about once a week, and it never failed that afterwards it would just be an abundance of synchronicities around that. I remember one that was mind blowing. I remember when I learned about past lives, that's kind of what triggered me to remember this. When I was learning about past lives with him, and how he said they're not linear, they don't happen one after another, they're all happening at the same time. I was like, I'm not quite sure how that can be. And he said, it'll all come together. I said, okay, cool. And I left. And a couple days later, I'm bringing my car to the shop to get an oil change, just a random Friday. And I walked into the waiting room, and it was just one other woman in there. And I sat down, and it's hard to explain how I felt, because it just felt so different than normal day-to-day human life. And I knew she knew what I needed to know. Like, I knew I needed to get some information from her. And I just sheepishly said something. I said, I'm so sorry. I don't, this is gonna sound strange, but I feel like there's something you need to tell me. She's like, good. I'm so glad you said something, because I was trying to figure out how to say something. Listen, I have a spiritual teacher. This is his name, and these are the things that he teaches, and this is his website. And I said, okay, thank you. It was just, and there was no awkward feeling to it, but like telling the story, it sounds awkward that you just walk up to a stranger and be like, there's some information you have for me. And they were like, I'm glad you said something. Here it is. And I went home and I looked up the website, and all of a sudden the stuff that I gathered from that teacher like linked everything together. And it was really neat. And then when you have experiences like that over and over and over, there's no turning back. There's you, and why would you? Right? So that's what his teachings were like. And they just kind of built on top of each other.
Do you ever find the lines between physical reality and that reality becoming blurred, and you're not sure which world you're in?
From time to time, I do. And I wouldn't say so much anymore, because for me at least, everyone is wired very differently and uniquely, which is what makes it so beautiful. But for me personally, I found that if I didn't anchor into some human activities for a couple of days, like if I was really just knee deep in the spiritual for 3 days, I would start to almost see the world glitch. And it kind of had a dual process, a purpose for me, because that's how I figured out how to stay balanced between the human and spiritual kind of thing for myself. But it also introduced more teachings from Big Dog when I went running back to him and said, why is it that I drive home, and well, home, because we had stayed at this giant, amazing campground where you have like permanent campers, and there's 300 campers, and you have all these parties and stuff. And it was really fun for a summer. And I drove back to that and got out, and uh, the 40-foot camper wasn't there. And I was like, where did the camper go? And I remember looking down at my feet, because I could hear something say, ground yourself. And I looked down at my feet, and I looked back up again, and it was there. That kind of an experience can really kind of make you uncomfortable with where you're at. So I learned to ground and balance when I started to feel that kind of disconnect from this grid, this I call it the holodeck. You remember Star Trek and the holodeck?
Yes, I love it.
How could you not remember? It's exactly like that. And so if you can get lost in it.
So you're saying that we live in a simulation?
I would absolutely say that. I would
Hmm.
absolutely say that.
Interesting.
My favorite analogy is that it's like a play. Because I feel like when we say, for me at least, and my community are these just amazing people who are figuring out who they are, most of them later in life. And I like to tell them this is like a play because I've heard people say, oh, well, when we say simulation, I feel like I'm alone. Like the holodeck, yeah, it's just him in there and everything else is made up. But I do love that analogy, but I like the analogy more that we're all in a play. And all the actors in the play really are your closest soulmates and friends. And you are here together. You are having that experience. But it's a play. You're it's it's a role.
Do you think that some of the people here on Earth are non-player characters? Just bots running
I
around?
I do, and I can only speak from my experience again, because we're all wired differently to experience things differently. When I come across someone who doesn't have any guides, loved ones to be found, like it's just not part of it, they feel more like they are connected. And I would say it this way, it feels more like they're connected to Mother Earth into that process than they are connected to coming down here purposely to be a human.
Many people out there want to connect with their guides, but are not able to do so.
Yeah.
Why is that?
A couple things that I teach that have proven to be real game changers and really shift people's ability to connect with their guides is how we look at our guides and how we understand who they are and what they're doing. And I'll start by throwing myself under the bus and embarrassing myself by saying, when I met Big Dog, I'm like 3 weeks into talking to him, right? Actually, like talking to him and getting more information, not just come back next Wednesday. And I was at home and I got all excited and I thought I could find out anything. And I wrote this whole list. How much longer are we going to live in the house? What are my kids going to do when they grow up? Like, this whole list of stuff that you would want to like typically ask like a psychic. And his response when I asked the questions are, "That's a stupid question." And I was like, "Well, excuse me, thank you. No, it's not." And he was like, "Yes, it is. You have to ask deeper questions. Those questions are a waste of time." And I was like, what? And that's when we started to get into very deep conversations about what a guide actually is. A guide is not on linear time. They're not a roof over their head, or let alone food in their belly. And they see everything that's happened to you, and they already see everything that's going to happen to you and all of the possible channels that you could walk down because it's not a straight line. And they have a job to get you from A to B. So it's kind of like when you have that super intelligent friend and they're talking about like the depths of atoms and the size and the magnitude of everything and you go, "Have you ever had Hubba Bubba?" Right? Bubble gum. And they're like, "What?" So guides are not really wired to all the time answer the questions that are not important in this moment. So when we shift into asking questions like, what is it you want me to know? When we shift from um, wanting to get the answers that we want about our human life, and we shift into understanding that they are a team working for us. So if you get on the team, it just opens the floodgates. Because if you say, what do you want me to know that would help me? Then all of a sudden more information is going to come through. I do ask them questions like yes and no questions. Should I do this? Should I do that? And I have gotten to a point 20 years in that if I don't get an answer at all, I know I've kind of like, pushed the boundary. Like, do I get the sports model or do I get the regular model of the car? And they're like, really? Like, really? Really? So I do ask questions, but ask deeper questions and be proactively on their team to help you, and you'll get a lot more information.
Is it just as simple as saying out loud guides? What is it that you want me to know? And then look for signs or something?
It can be. I would take it a step further. And just to clarify before I give this tool, everyone is intuitive. Everyone has a psychic and or mediumship abilities. Every single person does. It's naturally wired into us. This is why babies are talking and laughing at the corner of a room at somebody that's there that we can't see. It's the teen years, those fabulous years where we get really invested in the human experience and we don't need it. We have Google, we have maps and guides and people and do this, do this, do this. And we don't need to use our intuition to survive, so we don't. But it is just like taste buds. Everyone has it. And it gets dulled and it gets blocked. And this is reopened and released when we start to declutter our lives, our mental clutter, our physical clutter, our environmental clutter. And when it comes to communicating with guides, so this will segue into this tool, I tell people find a blank wall and sit about 3 feet in front of it and put your gaze halfway between you and that wall. And it's a defocusing, a simple defocusing. What you're looking for, your guides or other things as well, they're not in the material world. They're not walking around in the molecules, right? They're in the spaces in between the molecules. So when we sit down and we defocus with the intent of looking in a defocused state, not in the solid, but in the in-between, it's easier for us to connect to them. We're now setting ourselves up into a vibration that is closer to them than the physical world. This is why when you see something out of the corner of your eye and you see it, it's clear, and then you turn and look, it's gone. It is exactly that. It's exactly that, because when you saw it out of the corner of your eye, your peripheral is defocused. And when you turned and looked, you looked at the table and the door and the chair and all that kind of stuff, right? And you're like, it disappeared. It didn't disappear. You just started focusing on the solid. So people closing their eyes or just letting their gaze relax, that sets your vibration closer to them than the solid. And you might have, I would say this, stay open to any experience you have. You might hear them. You might feel a hand touch your shoulder. You might see something. You might know somebody's in the room. Stay open to any way that they can show themselves. And then you're letting them show you or speak with you in the way that is easiest for your intuitive channel to receive.
Let's fast forward in your life. How did you create the SAGE method, and what is that?
The SAGE method. So I talked about Big Dog and everything that he taught me for 2 years. And I went from complete skeptic to professional medium. I was booked out. I was starting to do readings globally. Like, it just kind of really expanded. And Big Dog then said to me, I need you to take everything I taught you in those 2 years, and I need you to bring it out into the world. So I did just that. And that is the SAGE method. So it's Big Dog's teachings, plus a couple other tools in there that fit very well. Like the pendulum work, that wasn't his teaching, but I know it's a good tool. And I compiled it into the course. I could only get it down to 7 weeks because there's a lot. There's a lot. And there's stages to go through that you can go through in 7 weeks. Some students take it and they take like 3 months to do it. Some students just get it done in 7 weeks. Everyone's very different. But that was really the birth of it. It was really a lot of teaching around the why. Why is your intuition not working? Why, what blocks are happening for you? And once those are, literally just laying your eyes on those blocks releases them, which is a wonderful thing. And so you walk away from the SAGE method, not only with a tool belt of spiritual tools, pendulum work, yes and no intuition, all of that. You walk away with life tools as well, because we have this energetic body. And that's really the key to everything, is the energetic body. We sense things energetically before we do physically. And we're walking around in this like fabulous, Stay Puft Marshmallow suit, right? This big space suit. And the space suit is your energetic body experiencing the world before you within that suit experiences it. And we walk around unaware many times of what's happening to our energetic body. As a result, we pick up things that can block. So when I say your intuition's blocked, it might not necessarily be like a relationship struggle or a physical environment. It might be that you work at a DMV and you come home every day having dealt with one or two customers that were angry, and you got a little bit of that anger in your energetic body. It's not yours. You don't need to carry it, but it does block. It does block. So the Sage method really addresses that.
What are some of the most common blockages?
Most common blockages. Well, I think that would be number one. That would be number one. What we bring about, what we put out there, we bring about. We are magnetic beings in this experience. And so if somebody's carrying like the energy of anger of customers, we're going to get a little bit more anger around us. When we take care of that body and we release everything that is not ours, we're still going to have some, crappy days that we're supposed to have. But when we release the stuff that we're not supposed to carry, that's just like extra, we get a whole lot more clarity. That would be the biggest one. Other blocks would be relationship ones are very, very common. When a person in a relationship is in fight or flight, and sometimes they don't even realize they're walking on eggshells, they're planning 2 steps ahead to make sure everything's okay. That pulls them out of the moment, and intuitive information is accessed in the moment. So that's a big block that pulls them out of the space where they can receive intuitive information. That's another big one. So managing relationships is big, not overly highlighted in the Sage method, but enough to say, hey, are there any brick walls in your life? Do you have, what were the beliefs that were given to you versus what really aligns with who you are? Those are probably the biggest ones. Doing things that make you unhappy, being in situations that make you unhappy, anything that pulls you out of the moment is going to pull you away from access to your intuitive channel.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
Oh, 100%.
Why?
100%.
All right. Why do we keep coming back over and over again?
Well, this goes back to, and if it's okay, I'd like to give like a little structure to think about around this one.
Sure.
Because it helps to explain it. And this is how I explain it to my students. This brings us back to the concept that multiple lives are not linear. They don't happen one after another. That's still a fantastic teaching. I'm not saying that it's incorrect. It is a linear way to look at lifetimes, but it is possible to have 2 lifetimes in one time frame as well. And this is how I describe it. This is how I set it up. If on the other side, you were a ball of light, this beautiful ball of light, and next to you was another ball of light, which is like a soulmate, part of your soul group. And there's all these balls of light. Every soul is a ball of light. Each of these souls are going to be connected to one another by almost like a strand of energy. And those that are closest to you in your light, in this structure, metaphorically, are your soul group. The ones very close to you are your soulmates. It's why, for example, if you're away from your kid and something happens to your kid, they fall down and scrape their knee or something, you kind of feel something and you don't know why. And then later you find out that's because we're so close on that like multi-dimensional spider web. Now, a lifetime is your higher self takes a little bit of that light out of the giant ball of light, takes a little speck of the light out, sends it down to Earth or other planets, and it has a life. And when it's done having a life, it comes on back. Here's the key to understanding that multiple lives all happen at the same time. The linear aspect of a lifetime only happens here on Earth. On the other side, time is not linear. So for your higher self, they're not sending you down and then waiting 100 years for you to come back. They're sending you down, you're coming back up in an instant. And all of them happen at the same time. So we are not only having this lifetime right now in accordance to the higher self, but all the other ones at the same time. When it comes to past life regression, I think it's a wonderful tool. I think it's a fantastic tool because all of these lifetimes are going to have similar patterns. You're going to have similar obstacles, and all those folks on the other side that are closest to you are all going to be in each of these as well. Think of it as just sending little bits of yourself to multiple playgrounds all at the same time. So that's really how I explain it. Reincarnation for me then would be defined as being aware of another one of your lifetimes. And the proof that has come out in some of these stories and these kids that come forward, and it brings tears to my eyes every time because I just think it's so, I think it's so magical. But past life regression, things like this, absolutely. Past life regression therapists a while back, as you know, started to figure out that they could past life regress into future lives, right? And other planetary lives. So that kind of supported that process. And I think we're moving toward understanding that.
Many of my guests talk about the ascension. Do you feel that some sort of global shift is occurring? And if not, it will occur soon?
Yes and no. I'll tell you what I've experienced and what I've followed with my guide. Now, my main guide right now, his name is Peter. He's been with me for over 15 years. And it was 2019. I started teaching the Sage Method 2008-ish. My memory's bad. But I was teaching it in person. In 2019, 2018, 2019, he came to me and said, I need you to put this online. And I was like, no. That's too much. It's overwhelming. And you want me on camera? I don't think so. I was too shy. And, but I followed what he said. And then came the pandemic. And that made sense. And the Sage Method blew up in the pandemic because people were trying to figure out who they were. And I got really interested when I saw the announcement that we were in a pandemic. And for some reason, I felt utterly calm. And I thought, that's not like me. I'm a good panicker. And why am I not panicking? And that's when I started asking him questions. He said, yes, we're going through a spiritual shift. It is going to be from here to about 2027. 2025, everything is going to just crack wide open. And so I've been waiting for this year since then, for like the last 6 years. And it makes sense to me too, because the pandemic was so difficult and so hard, and it forced people to take a look at who they were and what their role was in the world, and if that was what brought them joy. I mean, so much of that came out of the pandemic that when we came out of the other side of it, we already had people waking up, just waking up one after another, going, there's more to life than this. There's more to life than this. And then that's kind of like the first step into having a direct connection in the spiritual path. And here we are today on quite a roller coaster, might I add, to get to it. But there are extinction bursts that are happening with huge systems and huge things that can no longer stand on 2 feet. You know, these structures that just can no longer exist as we step into the age of Aquarius. We're going from the I to the we, and the I individuals are really struggling with that. And so we're having that shift, but it's kind of like a scale. It's kind of like a scale. What I'm understanding from my guide currently is that in 2027, we're going to look back on even this year, 2025, and we're going to be experiencing community-based experiences in ways that we never have before. And I said, can you give me an example? He said, yeah, think of it like how you experience going out and getting food now after the pandemic. You would have never done it that way, right? Think of how you look at like working from home and things like this. He said the whole world shifted in many different cultural ways, and we're now in a spiritual awakening cultural shift that is heading back to community, and it'll be in a way that we didn't expect.
So, what will the world look like in 2027? I mean, will it be completely community based?
I asked that question because that's what I wanted. I was like, oh yeah, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be great. We'll all be community of like love and all that. Like I'm trying to recreate like the second generation of, the hippie era. But he was like, no, sorry. This earth is very much built on pendulum swings. So we just had a pendulum swing tip the other way about a month and a half ago, energetically. And that happens over cycles. It's usually about 20-year cycle. So it's kind of a big deal when the pendulum goes the other way. We have to have the light and the dark. We have to have people here playing the role of the individual who isn't going to wake up. And we also have to let go of the judgment around that, because the judgment is actually what's holding some of us back too from being able to experience, what we want to experience. So there's always going to be people that are happy, people that are unhappy, people that are community oriented, people that are not, but the scales are going to tip big time. Big time. Look back on any major shift in the world, right? How it used to be really big to do A, B, and C, and now it's still there, but you got to kind of look for it. It's not as popular. That's really what's going to happen with the spiritual shift in 2027.
Is there anything that we should be doing to prepare for this?
Absolutely, absolutely. Hone your intuition. Hone your intuition. Get communication going with your guides, even if it's yes and no intuition. It is so big and it makes sense to me now. Here I am 20 years later. If you ask me why did this happen 10 years ago, I'd be like, oh, just people that are curious about intuition and whatnot. I now understand more so what my role is today, which is to make it easy and accessible. I'm very down to earth with it. I'm very open with it. I don't follow one particular type of path. I don't follow one particular type of a label on purpose. I am what they call like a lighthouse teacher, where you're in the boat, I'm the lighthouse, just giving you as much information as I can as you go on your way, which is very opposite of like a guru kind of thing. But my job is just to get as much information out as possible, because it's really imperative to use your intuition moving forward, because things are going to be intuitive based. They're not going to be directive based. They're not going to be, we're not going to be able to thrive in an indoctrinated way any longer. We are definitely going to need to have our own one-on-one connection. The world moving forward, and especially as we get to 2030, is going to be, what's a good way to explain that? I'll say it this way. In 2030, for example, we're going to look back at today and go, wow, do you remember when it was really hard to manifest? And it's going to be like, yeah, I remember that. It was really hard to manifest, right? And my guide said this to me 20 years ago when I opened up. He said, in 10 years, you're not going to have to explain yourself to people. Because 20 years ago, people would say, what do you do? I say, I'm a medium. And they'd say, what is that? You don't get that anymore. Everybody knows what a medium is now. And so when he explained that to me, I went, oh, okay, now I can kind of get on board. Because I was like, really? We're going to be able to manifest easier? And he's like, yeah, which means when we come energetically into this, when we interact in this world from the inside out instead of the outside in, that's where the manifesting happens. And then that's where we're going to get into the new flow of energy, like the new frequency, you could say. So to be in that frequency, we need to be functioning from the inside out, not the outside in. And what I mean by that is we need to be deciding what we want in our lives, and sending out love in the world. And those two things will bring us to where we decide we want to be. Whereas outside in is listening to authority, things like this, saying, no, this is what you should wear. This is what looks good. This is like all that type of stuff. No, my intuition tells me I should wear this today. And then you wear this today. And then you run into a woman wearing the same thing. And then you become best friends for life because you were looking for a best friend. That's how it's going to flow.
Do you feel that the frequency and the energy of the planet is shifting, and we need to manage ourselves or raise ourselves so we can shift along with it?
Yes, yes. Look at how much dark psychology has come out just in the last couple of years. I have boatloads of experience, as do many, of a lifetime of dealing with narcissists. I could have told you what gaslighting was 18 years ago. So, uh, but again, that awareness just wasn't out in the world. And how we show up for other people wasn't talked about. And now people know about narcissism, gaslighting, how to show up for all of these types of things. And that's not a fluke. It is not a fluke that we're actually seeing it on big screen play out, narcissistic tendencies and having people go, why would they do that? And you don't understand it because you're not a narcissist, right? So these aha moments, and it's almost like we're being schooled and given the tools and the understanding of how things work more. There's a lot of veils being uncovered right now.
If we use Star Trek as an example, do you ever see us becoming like a Star Trek society?
Oh, wow. What a great question. That's a good analogy. I'm absolutely going to give you that 100% because that's a good analogy. Because even in Star Trek, there were still troublesome spots and troublesome locations and fights and battles and stuff. But people they had morality under check. Like they had an understanding, and it wasn't about color. It wasn't about lifestyle. And it wasn't about anything like that. That's a really good analogy. That's a really good analogy. So. Yeah.
What are some of the misconceptions that people have about mediums?
Oh, how much time do you have? Well, I'll give you one that I think is the most helpful one for people to know. When a medium is doing a reading, they'll say, I see this, they're showing me this, I'm seeing a red truck, I'm seeing them opening the door to the red truck, I see a license plate that says Minnesota, and you'll hear a Minnesotan. I'm from Minnesota, sorry. You'll hear a Minnesotan medium say things like that. But what's actually happening for the medium is not as clear as it sounds like they're saying. So when you hear an intuitive say things along those lines, it makes you feel like they're seeing something so clearly, or they're hearing something so clearly. And the truth is that it's not that you see that red truck very clearly. It's that you have like a glimpse of a truck kind of thing, but your intuition, your knowing tells you that what you're looking at is a red truck. So I like to explain it this way. For me, when I see something intuitively, let's say they're trying to show me an apple. It's almost like I'm in a dimly lit room and there's a table in front of me and an apple. And you look at it and you're like, I think that could be an apple. And your intuition says, yes, it's a green apple. And you go, oh, okay. That's more how it works. And when people know that, it really sets them free, because one of the big blocks for people is that they're waiting for that movie screen vision. They're waiting for the sound that sounds like somebody standing right next to them. And I tell people, you've been seeing all along. You've been hearing all along. Maybe not every day, especially if you're in like fight or flight all the time or super stressed and you can't get into that moment. It's why people who meditate start to go, wow, I think I'm intuitive. You always were. You just got into the moment. That's kind of the trick of it all. But that's probably the biggest misconception, is that they think that we see it like it shows up in the movies, and it's just not like that. Another one I would say too is people can be fearful around a medium because they're afraid that a medium is going to see something that they don't want the medium to see. So camping, here's another campground story. A guy next to us finds out I'm a medium, and he's like, you can read my mind. And he was instantly scared. And I was like, no, nor would I want to, sir. But we are not able to see whatever we want to see. That's it. And that's another misconception.
Can you share a specific adventure from your book, Cracking Open: Adventures of a Reluctant Medium, that was particularly transformative or scary for you?
Yes. I started doing crossing over work about 2 years into my journey, toward the end of working with Big Dog.
What is that? Crossing over work?
Crossing over work is helping a spirit that is stuck to complete their transition.
Okay.
Complete is a strong word, to help them continue to move on in their transition. When we pass, we have three bodies. We've got the physical body, we've got the energetic body, which I talked about, which is the spirit, and then we have the programming body, which is our mind on linear time. When we pass, we leave the physical body behind, but the other two bodies go through a transition period. And that means, another way to say that is, in the in-between, on your way to crossing over, you are the exact same person you were on Earth. You just don't have a physical body. When you cross over is when you let go of that programming body, who is Bo on Thursday, who lives in this town. You let go of the programming body and you're completely full of your spirit again, and you're reuniting with that great big ball of beautiful light. So when a spirit gets stuck in the in-between, it's not necessarily a fear-based thing. It's that they kind of put the brakes on their process. As we've heard with so many near-death experiences, it's automatic. Crossing over is automatic. It's like a people mover, and you just get drawn to cross over and go through. But sometimes a spirit, there's a whole lot of reasons why a spirit would stop the transition process, but most of the time it's fear-based. Most of the time they were told that they were in life, that they were going to go to hell, and so they get scared that that's where they're going. So it's usually fear-based like that, and that's just one of many examples. So here I am 2 years in, and I know about this, and I understand it, and Big Dog says to me, I need you to do crossing over work. And wow, this is a pattern, isn't it? But I said, no. Yeah, the book is The Reluctant Medium for a reason. But I said, no, I'm not really interested in that. That sounds kind of spooky. Like, I don't even watch horror movies anymore, and I'm a little scared of that. And Big Dog showed me a vision of a little island, and it had like, I don't know, 10-foot story building on it. And it was surrounded by this large moat of water. And people were jumping off, and not like out of the windows or anything, but they were jumping, into the water. And I knew it represented that when they landed in the water, they had died and they were going through their transition process. And he said, look down. And I looked down at the edge of the water, and my kids were in there. And he said, they're swimming. Would you help them if they were swimming? And I was like, 100%. And he goes, then go help people. And I was like, oh, he completely put it into perspective for me, that crossing over isn't this like mystical, I'm helping a ghost. And I say this all the time, it goes through people too. Crossing over work is a beloved person is swimming across this moat, and sometimes they pause and they get a little tired, and you need to just show up for them. And then they can regain their strength, which is this automatic pull. So anyway, I get called to clear a house, and a woman had passed in that house. And I showed up, and it was the first time I had come across a very vicious spirit, because again, in the in-between, we are the exact same person we were. Before we died, we just don't have the physical body. And this was the first time I dealt with a perpetrator of sorts type of a person in the in-between. And the woman had passed. She left behind, 4 beautiful kids, just an amazing husband. And it was really sad. She passed from suicide. And this man in spirit form had been an aggressor in the house. And she had said it when she was alive, that this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. But she also was processing through some personal trauma and stuff like that with a therapist and such. So she was really struggling mentally. It's actually a very, very heartbreaking story. And I do not believe that he was the cause of her passing. She was a victim of suicide. I believe there's a lot of factors, but this one spirit was in the house. The family was so uncomfortable that they had moved out of the home. And not just because of the passing of their loved one, but because the house itself was so uncomfortable. And I walked in, and up to that point, I don't know, I guess all the crossing over work I had done up to that point was relatively easy, like a little bit of cheerleading. You got this. It's okay. You know, you're not going to hell. You're going to be good. You're fine. Most of the time, crossing over work is just somebody that gets a little confused in the middle. And when you show up, it's almost like you anchor, like somebody else's, okay, I'm okay. And then the minute they know I'm okay, they just start that automatic move again. So it's not as flashy as the movies. But this gentleman, I remember going upstairs and I was walking up the stairs, and this is the first time I'd ever experienced something like this. There was a white wall at the top of the stairs, and I was so uncomfortable. I felt like I was walking into my own doom. Like I knew nobody was in the house or up there upstairs, but I felt like I was walking into serious like danger. But I'm like, but there's nobody up there. And the white wall ahead of me at the top of the stairs, all of a sudden it just turned black, like it was like black oil, and it started to move. And I everything in me wanted to just turn around and say, well, I gotta go. Now, mind you, I was recruited to do this because somebody else had already gone in. A gentleman that had been doing this work for 10 years said, I can't. Can you try? I was like, sure. So I get to the top of the stairs. I am now fearful from head to toe, and then equally telling myself logically, there's nothing here that can hurt you. So just keep going. And I remember going into a bedroom and I saw her, and there was an interaction with her and the family, and it was very beautiful. And then he like came at me. I just remember him coming at me, and I felt like and it doesn't make logical sense, but I felt like I was going to be like attacked and like even like assaulted. It was just, and then he was behind me, and I'm like, I'm just thoroughly creeped out. And then I got mad. Then I got mad because I'm like, no, I'm done. So that whole, when you hit that point where you're like, okay, this is enough. I'm done. Hell no. And I didn't say all that out loud because the family's there and I was being respectful. It was a very difficult time for everybody. But in my head, I just went from, oh no, I'm to, oh no, you're not. I'm not doing this with you. I know enough about myself, my energetic body. I am done with you. We are done. Like that's what was going through my head. I saw him pull back to the wall, and then I didn't see him again. It was almost like something like wrapped around and like kind of pulled him out sort of thing and crossed over. It was almost the best I can explain it was like this pulse of anger from me, like said, that's it, you're crossing over. It's time to go. I think it was just putting the foot down and saying, I'm not going to, you're feeding off of my fear and I'm all out, you know, I'm giving away lollipops in fear and I'm all out of fear. So you get a lollipop today.
Do you think your resistance to him somehow grounded him and moved him along?
I do. I do. And I wish I could say why. But when you're in these realms, sometimes it's hard to find the words to explain the experience or the feeling. And I do. I feel like me putting my foot down was like putting an end to that style of like feeding off of fear. And it was like, no, I'm done. I'm done.
For someone just starting on their spiritual path, what one piece of advice would you give from cracking open that is the most important?
That's a good question. Reclaim your space. Reclaim your space. And even if you only do that energetically, I've been teaching people something called GCP for 20 years. Well, not 20, like 18, because that's about when I started teaching. And it's ground, clear, protect. It is that simple. Just, we all know the components of it. Just do it in order. And I give it to everybody I can. Just ground and then clear out what's not yours. You remember the DMV energy, right? Clear that out. It's not yours to carry. And then the P is for protect. And so just start with a bubble. It's not an isolating bubble. It's a filtration kind of system. Start with a bubble around yourself and say, only that which is allowed for my highest good can come in. If it's not for my highest good, it can't come in. So now you go to the DMV the next day for work and there's crabby customers, but that stuff's not coming in your energy field. And then you're driving home kind of a little wigged out going, why am I happy? Like, this is unusual, but that's exactly what it is. Reclaim your space. That right there is going to get you back into the moment. It is going to bring you huge amounts of clarity on who's in your life, what you're doing in your life, and if it aligns, and then your intuition will start opening.
What's your website so people can find out more about you?
Oh, I do a pretty good job at keeping it all in one place. It's thesagemethod.com. So TheSagemethod.com.
And your YouTube channel?
Same thing. The Sage Method.
What kind of content are you posting there?
A lot of teaching like this. I share a lot of crossing over stories, but mostly I teach about intuition and energy, and I try to give people tools every single time. It's actually the Sage podcast. I try to give people tools every single time that they can apply in their life. That's I guess that's the lighthouse teacher in me.
What do you got that's upcoming?
Upcoming? What one are we posting? I think we just posted one about relationships is coming up. People have a really tough time balancing relationships when they open up and they go through a spiritual awakening, and people around them don't. So I do have one coming up on that. We just released one also on balancing your energy and using opposites as a tool to get more intuitive information, things like that.
I guess I should have said in general, what's up and coming for you?
Oh, I was focusing on that YouTube channel.
Well,
I was like, oh yeah, okay, so what's coming up on the podcast?
Well, that's okay.
No, what's coming up, in general, I don't really have anything like coming forward. I am in the process of writing my second book. So that's what I'm trying to focus on right now. Cracking Open. This is the reluctant, right? Cracking Open came out in 2011. And since then, I've had requests for book 2. So to anyone listening who's ever requested that of me, I just want you to know I am actively writing the book.
It's a reason for me to have you back.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you.
Before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
A last positive message. I'm going to think of a couple and then pick one. For me, one of the most empowering messages that I've been able to share with my students is that intuition and the life you want is not about getting there and then having it. When it comes to manifesting, working with the universe, your intent on the direction that you're going and the little steps that you take is bigger than getting there. You don't have to solve all your problems to open your intuition. Starting to solve problems and starting to declutter will open your intuition. So it's not an end game. It's just a shift in focus. So you don't have to do it all. You just have to be doing little bits. And if you're doing little bits, then it all starts right away, sooner than you would think.
Bo, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.